They're Russia's biggest anti-government demonstrations in 5 years, yet they may seem to some like a drop in the bucket. In cities from the Pacific port of Vladivostok to Saint Petersburg, determined supporters of Alexei Navalny turning out to protest corruption. Critics of the Kremlin may hail a turnout, for instance, of 20,000 in the capital. But what's 20,000 in a city of nearly 12 million? Why, despite 2 years of recession, are so many more Russians immune to the excesses of the elite? Or are they? Navalny seems to have struck a nerve with a recent YouTube documentary that accuses Prime Minister Medvedev of benefiting from the largesse of many an oligarch. The video approaching 13 million views as we speak. We'll be asking about the accusations, about the rounding up of protesters, and whether 17 years after he first came to power, any of this undermines Vladimir Putin, whose power and influence is, well, a daily topic of conversation here in the West, like in France, what with the three of the main contenders for president openly allied with the Russian president. Today in the France 24 debate, do Russians care? We'll be joined from Moscow by Polina Nemirovskaya, human rights campaigner with Open Russia, the advocacy group founded by former businessman and activist Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Yelena Mishanovska, who writes for daily newspaper Moskovsky Komsomolets and weekly Sobezednik. Many thanks for being with us. Also joining us, independent journalist Anastasia Kirilenko. Welcome to the show. And Anton Kozlov, who teaches at the American Graduate School of Paris. Nice to see you again. The France 24 debate on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Sunday saw the demonstrations in nearly 100 Russian cities. The day after, well, came the first trials. Alexei Navalny himself sentenced to 2 weeks behind bars for unlawful protest and resisting arrest. Sharon Gaffney has more.
Arriving at a courthouse in Moscow, defiant Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny continued to rally his supporters, sending tweets and photographs from inside the building. The thieves defend themselves this way, he said, but you can't arrest everyone who's against corruption. There are millions of us. Navalny has been sentenced to 15 days in prison for disobeying a police officer at a rally in Moscow. He's also been ordered to pay a fine of 20,000 rubles, or about €350, for his role in organising demonstrations. The 40-year-old is Russia's most prominent critic of President Vladimir Putin. He's announced his own bid for the presidency, but a recent conviction on fraud and embezzlement charges could bar him from running. Most of those arrested during Sunday's rallies have been freed from custody. The European Union has demanded the immediate release of those who remain in detention. But the Kremlin has rejected the calls and accused organisers of encouraging people to break the law. In a statement, an EU spokesperson said the Russian police action had prevented basic freedoms of expression, association and peaceful assembly, which are fundamental rights enshrined in the Russian constitution. The US State Department has also condemned the arrests as an affront to democracy. While public gatherings are allowed in Russia, authorities frequently refuse to grant permission for anti-Kremlin rallies. The weekend protests were the largest seen since anti-government demonstrations swept Russia in 2011 over allegations that votes had been rigged in parliamentary elections.
Let me begin with you, Polina Nemirovskaya. Are you? What's your assessment of how many people came out really across Russia on Sunday, and of what's been going on in court today?
Hello, it's been really thousands of people, and nobody expected that the outcome will be this much. What was the most surprising is that in Saint Petersburg there was 10,000 people on the Square of Mars, which is actually a very big rally for Saint Petersburg, because Saint Petersburg showed the lowest outcome on recent elections to State Duma. I'm now in Tverskaya court in Moscow, and we are helping people who've been detained for last hours and last day, actually. We're helping them to avoid being sent to jail for 10 days. However, 3 out of 4 people we've defended so far went to police station for detention from 8 to 10 days. And now we've had our first victory. We've made it so one man is not staying in jail after all. And what is more and more alarming is that there was investigators, state investigators in all the police stations when the people were detained, and they were questioning them. And we think that it will lead to a criminal case like Bolotnaya Square.
A criminal case with longer sentences. So a big backlog at court. Let me go around the room. Let me ask you, Anastasia Kirilenko, what's word you've been hearing from those you work with in Russia today?
People were detained just because they were protesting. There were no signs, no slogans, even, and they didn't yell anything, and they were just caught. Like Olga Orlova, my colleague, she's also a journalist covering science, very not political topics. She was there, and she was detained for 11 hours. And what was written in protocols, and this is completely false, she said. They were incriminated that they aggressed police and so on. So the situation is serious. I think when you said that even Alexei Navalny was sent for 15 days in prison, this is the answer why Russians don't care more. And why only something like 20,000 went in protest in Moscow.
Why? People don't want to go through the trouble. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, people don't want to go in jail just for being protesting.
They don't want to go to jail. And are you as surprised as Polina was at the turnout?
I'm I'm surprised that many people, and not only in Moscow, but in many major cities of Russia, protested, yes, amid such circumstance. Because exactly like Bolotnaya Square case, it was 5 years ago almost, several dozens of people were sent in jail for several years.
And yet people came out today. Sunday, excuse me. Yelena Militskinova, are you surprised at the turnout? How do you explain the fact that there were these big demonstrations then in places like Moscow and Saint Petersburg and elsewhere?
I think we can't compare this demonstration which we had yesterday with Bolotnaya. It's completely different, and the difference is that yesterday we had unsanctioned meeting. That's why I did not participate myself, because I think people who wanted yesterday that the government respect all laws and rules and be out of corruption, they have to respect our government laws themselves and don't participate in any meetings which are not approved by government. It's a very strict law in Russia, and whatever you want and whenever you participate, it has to be approved by some local or some local laws. So if they had been sanctioned,
because you're right. The demonstrations had not been sanctioned by the government. They were not allowed to march, and yet people turned up anyway. What do you think?
Yes.
What do you think about the grievance, though, Yelena? Is it a just cause about people upset about the levels of corruption in high circles?
Yes, I think it's the main reason they are very upset, because we thought that Medvedev is the last one who is honest and who does not do the things which other people who have some laws do in Russia. But he's the same as all of them. And that's why we are very sad.
Let me ask a question before I turn to Anton Kozlov, to Polina. What was the makeup of the crowd? What kind of people were they? Were they old, young? What age groups? What demographics? Were they affluent people? Who took part in the demonstration Sunday? Who was in the crowd?
mostly it was new people who have never been to protest before, and they've never been to Bolotne. They only heard it. And there was a lot of young people, guys that go to school, and students. And this is this is what I think is connected with the fact that Navalny is one of the leaders who tries to speak to the younger audience through social networks. And while our government is busy with filling the older generations with bullshit TV shows, Navalny and people like him were working. I'm sorry. We're working with younger audiences and with video bloggers and with social media, and this is the reason why there were so many young people on the streets. But this has a very it may be really disappointing for them, because nobody actually warned them about what can actually happen to them. And we now settle our headquarters for helping the detained people, which we didn't expect to do, because we work on criminal cases mostly as a human rights project, but we had to do it because nobody else would do that. And people who were doing that, they didn't have enough possibilities for helping other people out. And so I'm afraid that this big crowds of young people who for the first time came in the streets to protest against the government and to protest against Vladimir Putin and his regime won't come again, because they weren't warned and they weren't supported by people who actually called them on the streets. And this may be the first and the only time they come out. So we're trying to help them, and we're trying to make everyone happy, I don't know, and so that this would stop.
All right, let me bring in Anton Kozlov on this, because there's several points there. First of all, the point that was just made about how these are young people, they'd never been to a demonstration before, and they get arrested. And you just heard there Polina Nemirovskaya saying that many of those people she fears won't be interested in civics anymore and demonstrations and politics. Your reaction on that?
Well, not necessarily so. I think there are a lot of young people because, to begin with, I think it's absolutely right. Navalny, he's very good at political communications, particularly with the young people, younger generation. He is bright. He's got a very good sense of humor. He communicates really well, and he uses social media, YouTube, Facebook, and other stuff to attract attention. He is very likable as a person, as a personality, I think, as a television personality. That's one thing. Another thing, I think it's important to keep in mind that this protest, in a sense, it's similar to Occupy Wall Street, I think, because people are in many ways fed up with this system of state oligarchy when 90% of national wealth belong to 10% of Russian population. Therefore, the young people, that's what they've been talking about. They came out to express their unhappiness about it.
But Occupy Wall Street petered out, much like a similar movement we saw in France last year.
I'm not saying that this is going to last and eventually, win, but I think grievances are somewhat similar, if you want.
And this generation gap, it's an important point. You just heard Polina Nemirovskaya saying older people getting their information from the news on TV and younger people through social media. Has the state been caught off guard?
Well, I think, as I said, Navalny, he's very good at political communications. Basically, what he appeals to, maybe younger, although I'm not sure, better educated part of the population, because if you watch Russian television, it's extremely low quality. The news shows, talk shows, everything, it's very kind of yellow television in a sense. So therefore, younger people who are more familiar with what's going on in the West, who sit online and read news in English, who watch Western films and so on and so forth, they are more attracted to his message.
Anastasia Kirilenko, beyond the educated, cosmopolitan people who live in urban areas, can this movement gain any traction?
I don't think so, unfortunately, because the elder generation is brainwashed. I'm communicating with people, with my own family and other elder colleagues, and many of them believe that economic crisis in Russia, this is just the fault of America, of Europe, etc. And Navalny is an enemy. You have to imagine what is the state propaganda, unfortunately. And this narrative lasts since 17 years.
So you have arguments at family reunions about this?
Yeah, and but school children, they're not satisfied with this narrative because it does not sound credible enough for them. They're young and unafraid, and they protest. But also, I think in Russia we say everything is secret and nothing is hidden. It means corruption is overwhelming. For example, this luxury property of Dmitry Medvedev, it was already known in 2010, I think, because it was like one of the palaces described by Navalny. It was already in the media. Officially, it belongs to a certain philanthropy foundation, but Mr. Medvedev visits it personally. So people know, ordinary people know everything about corruption in Russia. This is not the point. And many people who protested wrote on social media, we went in protest not for Navalny, but for ourselves. Because this is like a meeting around values, not only around the personality.
All right. I sense that you have issues with Alexei Navalny. We'll pick up on that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.